In this lecture, we're going to be going over what counts as evidence in a research paper. This ties back to what I talked about in an earlier lecture, where we talked about the maxims of Grice. And one of those maxims is the maxim of quality. Do not say what you believe to be false. That one seems kind of obvious, but I think the other one is more nuanced. Do not say that for which you lack adequate evidence. What counts as evidence is going to differ from genre to genre. So in some genres, our threshold for what counts as evidence may be fairly low, whereas in others, it's pretty high. And in a research paper, it's pretty high. It's about as high as it gets, where you have to have good evidence in order to convince your readers. So the big question is, what counts as evidence? Well, the simple answer, and this comes from Joseph Williams, whatever readers will accept as a fact without further support. So we've talked in previous video about points. You've got these different levels of points. You've got the main point, the thesis, and at every level, those points, the main point, the thesis, the section points, the paragraph points, those are all claims that we're making, factual claims. And readers aren't going to accept those claims just because you said them. They want evidence. And what counts as evidence ultimately depends on our readers. It's whatever readers will accept as a fact without further support. Research data is going to be the main source of our evidence in a research paper. Stands to reason, doesn't it? In a primary research paper, some of that data will come from previous research, from other people's research. In a primary research paper, the main source of the data will be new research that the author or authors conducted. In a secondary research paper, all of the research data comes from other people's work, other people's data. That doesn't make it any less your argument. It's still your argument. It's just that the evidence to support your argument comes from other people's research. Another sort of evidence is examples. A well-chosen example can count as evidence in certain situations. So for example, if you say X is possible, and then you give an example of X, well, that's evidence. Common knowledge is also considered evidence. Readers aren't going to question common knowledge. You may question it sometimes. You may challenge common knowledge and say that the evidence doesn't support it. But if you just say this is true because we all agree that it's true, that's usually going to be enough because common knowledge is uncontroversial. Expert testimony. Sometimes it's going to be sufficient to back up your points by simply bringing up expert testimony. In other words, citing an expert who says exactly what you are claiming. So if this person is reputable and well respected, that may be sufficient for your readers. And then logic, right? So deductive logic especially will count as evidence, right? So to support one claim, you may simply deduce that claim from other facts that have already been accepted. There's an obvious flaw in the example I'm giving here, but the point is, if it's well-constructed logic, then it will count as evidence. The takeaway is that in a research paper of any sort, primary or secondary, your argument ultimately hinges on the quality of your evidence. If it's not good evidence, your argument falls apart. So you have to choose your evidence carefully, choose your sources carefully in a secondary research paper.